We begin in Washington, where top trade negotiators for Canada and the U.S. met once again today, and once again, they walked away with no deal.
We're going to continue working. Our job is not yet done. Thank you.
If a deal is not made in the next 48 hours, Canada faces 50% tariffs across hundreds of goods. The CBC's Kate McKenna is following this story and joins us from Washington. Thanks so much, Kate. Canadian officials met with USTR Jamieson Greer and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. What can you tell us about that?
Well, it was an hour and 45 minutes long. That is the longest of any of the meetings so far in recent history. USTR Jamieson Greer was there, and for the first time in recent history, so was Donald Trump's Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. And that is important because Lutnick is in charge of the 232 tariffs, or what we would call the sectoral tariffs, whereas Greer and Trump have the ability to get rid of the new slate of tariffs set to come in tomorrow at midnight before they take effect. Lowering tariffs on sectors like steel, aluminum, auto, and lumber requires special exemptions that would have to be written by Lutnick's office. And we know that Canada was not just looking to get rid of the tariffs that are set to come into effect tomorrow at midnight, this new tariff, 50% tariff on about $28 billion in Canadian exports. They also want relief on these sectoral tariffs. Now, some people may remember that Lutnick has said some things about Canada in recent history, including back in April when he said that Canada sucks. But he's said to have the ear of Donald Trump, and I'm told that he gets along well with Dominic LeBlanc, Canada's U.S.-Canada trade minister. LeBlanc, as we heard, didn't have much to say leaving the meeting, just that there's still work to do. So the question is, do they have a proposed deal to put in front of the Prime Minister and the President at this point? We don't know, but Mark Carney did say today he plans to speak with Donald Trump over the next little while. And we know that Canada has warned that a deal should be made before the new tariffs kick in at midnight tomorrow.
And Kate, what do we know more broadly about where things are at ahead of that impending deadline?
Yeah, sources have told me that the sticking points have been auto and lumber. The U.S. just doesn't see lumber as being in the same basket as the other sectoral tariffs. We know that this has been an irritant between the two countries for decades now. And our sources say that they're not willing to go low enough on auto. So whether that has changed in this recent iteration of talks, not only did they have that meeting today, they also had one yesterday afternoon. We're not sure yet. Canada is willing to make some concessions on some of the key irritants the U.S. has highlighted for the right deal. That could mean removing retaliatory tariffs, convincing provinces to drop their booze bans, and giving the U.S. the same dairy market access as the U.K. We know that the U.S. is also looking for a specific deal or a special deal on security, defense, and critical minerals, something that could be difficult to sell in Canada given the public's mood. So lots of challenges now with just hours to solve. And if there is no deal, Mark Carney said again today, he's got plans for any situation that may arise, once again leaving space open for possible retaliation.
Kate, thanks very, very much. That's the CBC's Kate McKenna in Washington. The Power Panel joins me now to talk about all of this. Vandana Cotter was an advisor to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. And here with me in studio, Kate Harrison is a Conservative political analyst, and Rob Russo is Canada correspondent for The Economist. Welcome, everyone. Vandana, I want to start with you, and I want you to get out your crystal ball and tell me, are the signs...
A lot of pressure.
Exactly. Are the signs pointing towards a trade deal before the deadline?
You know, I will say Minister LeBlanc and Prime Minister Carney have a great poker face here. I think they don't want to let anything out of the bag. I don't think they want to lean towards anything because, as we know, all of it depends on sometimes President Trump's moods, how he feels that day. And as you know, like, he's not only the president, he's a bit of a performer. You know, he's going to make it come down to the wire. He likes the idea that Canadians are waiting with bated breath. So I don't know what's going to happen, you know, but I do think it's very positive that Ms. Charette and Minister LeBlanc continue to be in the United States and continue to speak to Jamieson Greer. I think it's positive that also the Prime Minister will be speaking to the President. I think all those track towards a very good sign.
Rob, nothing focuses the mind like a deadline, but what is the best case scenario out of all of this? What does it look like for the Canadians and even for the Americans?
Well, the best case scenario would be a deal that eliminates all tariffs and keeps CUSMA in its place. You know, you're going to hear something from me, Karina, as a former colleague you probably never heard. I don't know what's going to happen.
What?
I think there are some things we do know and we can discern. I think we can discern without a doubt that Canada wants a deal. I think for some time that was in doubt. A lot of people were telling the Prime Minister that it might be better off just to walk away without a deal, because politically he may pay a price. He may pay a price because he said that he was going to deliver a deal that would be even better than CUSMA. But we now know that Canada wants a deal. If he does get a deal, it will be measured against the PM's promises. So that's something else we know. There are three possibilities. One is, and I think the most likely scenario, given the intensity of the discussions, is that there is an extension of the Section 338 tariffs before they're applied, and they keep talking. I cannot understand how a president, including a Twitch president like President Trump, would say, let's blow it up by applying the tariffs midnight Wednesday at 12:01, because the talks seem to be inching towards progress. They're very quiet. The second possibility is we have no deal. And Minister LeBlanc and Janice Charette get on a plane, come back to Ottawa and consult with the Prime Minister about what we do next. And the third possibility is a deal. I think it's a more remote possibility, but it seems to be there. When you see somebody like Jameson Greer, who was very voluble on the weekend, suddenly saying absolutely nothing, that suggests that they're down to the shorter strokes.
Now, before I turn to you, Kate, you mentioned that it does look like Canada wants a deal this time. I'm wondering whether the accusations that perhaps Canada was ragging the puck a little bit and just not that interested in.
Microphone's out.
I guess there's a microphone issue. Okay, I'm just going to keep going.
I can hear you.
Yeah,
loud and
exactly.
clear.
You can hear me. That's important. Is that Donald Trump maybe knew that or got wind of that, and that's why this threat came along?
The Section 338 tariffs were designed to get Canada back to the table, because the truth was we were in no hurry for a discussion. We didn't want to have necessarily these kinds of discussions before the midterm elections. They clearly have had an impact. I think that the impact has been assessed by certainly Jameson Greer to be adequate, because he's still at the table and he's more circumspect than he was. So, I mean, that's the question. President Trump is going to have to decide whether or not the threat of those tariffs, rather than applying those tariffs, is enough to keep Canada at the table and moving in the direction that he wants Canada to move in.
Okay, so sort of best case scenarios there. Kate, what are the worst case scenarios?
Well, I think the worst case scenario is we are without a deal, no path to getting a deal, and we have the application of the tariffs as they are. Workers have been in a lot of pain for a number of months, well over a year, in the case of steel and auto and aluminum and lumber and others. So certainly the worst case scenario is that the Trump administration makes good on their threat. I do think it is a bit concerning when the question was put to the Prime Minister today, what does a good deal look like? He was not really able to articulate clearly what that was. And I think when you compare that to some of the previous commitments he's made around securing a better deal, and then moving that to, well, we already have a great deal, the fact that he's not articulating specifics around even sectoral tariff impacts, to me, says that maybe things might not be as close as they ought to be at this particular juncture. And he may be keeping his powder dry, frankly, to be able to say when we do hit a deal, oh, well, this is the best case scenario. But he doesn't want to articulate that now because he wants to be able to sell whatever we do end up with as being the right deal for Canadians. Or if we end up without a deal and we have to retaliate, then maybe that was the best deal for Canadians. But he's not being particularly forthcoming about what it is that looks to be in Canada's best interest.
Although, to be fair, we are really down to the wire right now, and his defense of not being specific today was not negotiating in public.
And I take that point when we're less than 48 hours away from the deadline, but he hasn't felt particularly obligated to keep Canadians in the light on these negotiations really for the better part of over a year now. And again, we've been talking about a lot of these issues, Karina, around sectoral tariffs and supply management and all these other things for 10 months. And it's really whenever the Prime Minister deems it to be in his interest to share information with Canadians that he decides to do so. It's hard to campaign on this as kind of your core issue and not be more transparent. It's not term sheets, but we are getting very little information. And the Prime Minister, I think, because he ran on this, owes Canadians a little bit more than what he's sharing.
Okay, Vandana, I'm certainly hoping you can hear me. I'm hoping microphone gets fixed. How does the Canadian government effectively calibrate its message behind closed doors when Washington keeps shifting the goalposts?
I mean, I think they just have to be transparent about that, I think, and they have been. I mean, I think it's about negotiating and focusing on what's best for Canada. And then, like, they're not going to kowtow to anything that they say just because they're the United States. And I think he's been clear on that. I think what Canadians want is confidence. The Prime Minister is going to continue fighting for them, because anyone can just sign a deal. That could be done. But to sign a good deal, to hold up for what's the best case scenario, considering that every single country that's has a deal with the U.S. has some element of tariffs, you want to know that Canadians are fighting for you, and that this is not the only thing you're focused on. I mean, it's one thing for the United States, but we've had 20 new economic partnerships, record amount of foreign direct investment into Canada in 2025 alone, $23 billion. And creating job creation. So I think it's about doing more than just one thing. I think showing that this is going to be a shift to the United States, and that we are focused on it. But this has to be a shift ultimately in how Canada operates itself. We cannot be so U.S.-centric. That is a core part of who we are, considering that we share a border and the job market and the amount of interdependency we have there. But we also have to think of nation-building projects like the Churchill Project, but also thinking outside the box of what else Canada can do, so that in the future we can be agency for ourselves. And I think Canadians still continuing to have confidence in the Prime Minister of that.
In terms of messaging behind closed doors, Rob, from your vantage point covering international trade and U.S. relations, what do you think Washington insiders, or even inside the negotiating team, how seriously do they take this unified message that Canada is trying to push in terms of the no appetite for concessions, we're Team Canada, we're unified. How seriously do you think they take that?
I mean, are we unified? I see a lot of provincial premiers essentially saying that they're going to have a veto over how this turns out. I see some provinces with American booze on their shelves and others without it, and some provinces saying they won't put it back unless they get what they want out of the deal. Look, we do have a Prime Minister who has empowered the premiers in a way that other Prime Ministers haven't in the past. Perhaps the notion is that if Washington understands that they are not the only unpredictable actor in all of this, it may work to our advantage. I see Washington actually taking advantage of the division to apply tariffs where they think that it might hurt us most. There was an interesting column a couple of days ago in the Toronto Star by an international trade lawyer named Barry Appleton, and he sort of pointed out things that we might want to look for if there is a deal, and I think that they're worth underlining. He said to look for things like, are the tariffs being suspended or withdrawn? If they're suspended, that sword hangs over our head. Look for the word interim. A lot of trade deals in the current world have interim clauses in it. We should be wary of that. Look for a lot of conditions that are in effect spring-loaded. Nothing will happen unless the other side does this first. Those kinds of agreements, particularly when you're dealing with President pandemonium, the sort of caprices and whims of Donald Trump, will be very, very difficult to enforce. Everybody hopes, I think, that we get a good deal. Everybody, including the people around the Prime Minister, are cognizant of the fact that it could be ephemeral.
Mm-hmm. Kate, in terms of the Team Canada approach, do you think that's still a strategy worth pursuing, or has it reached an expiry date?
I think it fell apart a few months ago. And to Rob's point, the application of the tariffs has certainly been punitive on the provinces, or the prospective tariffs, have been punitive to the provinces that have the alcohol bans. There's a direct map. That Venn diagram is a circle. So clearly, it is a pain point. I do think that the premiers have been, like many Canadians, shut out from status updates on the conversations. You saw a lot of that frustration at the Council of the Federation, premiers kind of speaking out and saying openly that they didn't really have information from our government about the status of conversation. So if you're going to approach this as Team Canada, you kind of have to bring the team along with you. So I do think that they have been largely left out of the conversation, as has a lot of the opposition. And in the previous round of negotiations, there was more of an effort from the Trudeau government to include members of Conservative caucus in border ridings and involve them in the outreach, and that has been absent as well. So heavy is the head that wears the crown for this Prime Minister. He campaigned on this. He has been largely leading the conversation on his own, and now he'll be the one to have the consequences of the outcome.
Vandana, Team Canada, the right approach, or is it a bit of a fallacy?
I still think it's overall the right approach, but I think if you think just they're Team Canada in the sense of, yes, we want to fight the tariffs, yes, we're protecting Canadian jobs. I think for the most part, Mr. Blanc has kept everyone up to date. And if you look at even that clip with Doug Ford, it sounds like that Believe in Team Canada still agrees. I think the misnomer is that they'll all agree on the strategy, right? Like every province has a unique set of what their economy is focused on. And that's going to cause some tension, of course. But I still think they're all fairly united that we do have to tackle these tariffs, that we all have to work together to protect jobs. But, for example, some economies or some provinces may not like a certain concession that affects their particular industry that is a huge piece of their provincial economy, right? So I think the Team Canada approach still exists. And I think part of Mark Carney's strategy is actually not being heavy-handed because, as you know, the president can be a bit temperamental. And should he have a bit of a distance from what Doug Ford says on booze on the shelves or whatnot, it gives him some leeway to be like, well, that's the province. I'm still working with you here, but there's a point where they're gonna continue to impact your economy if we don't make a deal. So I think that's a bit of strategy on his end. But I think overall they're still there. But again, they're not going to be united exactly in what concessions, if there has to be one, what they'll be, and they're going to have different viewpoints on what that strategy moving forward should be.
45 seconds each. Just giving you that heads up. Rob, global markets. What are they saying about? How do they perceive Canada's ability to hold its own on this?
We'll find out. The Prime Minister wants to have an investment conference here in September. I think that a lot of the people who are thinking about investing hundreds of billions of dollars in Canada want to know whether or not they're going to have preferential access to the U.S. market. And I think that will have an impact if we don't. So I think that's one of the reasons why the Prime Minister and the government have made it clear after some uncertainty that they want a deal.
Okay. Kate, private sector clients that you deal with, what would be your immediate advice to them on how to protect their supply chains when so much is uncertain right now?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of those same groups are, those that want to see a certain investment environment in Canada and to get that certainty. I think, there's a lot of groups that have properly made use of organized labor and those connections in the United States to be able to speak to the Trump administration. And I would say broadly that business advocacy, through BCC and some of the others has been quite strong that a deal is in Canada's best interest. And so we have a business-minded Prime Minister, and I would hope that he's keeping those considerations at the fore.
Okay, thank you all very much for joining us today. That's the Power Panel, Vandana Cotter, Kate Harrison, and Rob Rousseau.